Zacian was once the king of VGC, and coming into Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it received a bunch of nerfs, and because of that, everyone thought this Pokemon had fallen off. Now, while it might not be the best restricted in the format anymore, today we will be discussing why I still think this Pokemon is good, and I'll also showcase some teams from some online tours that I think you guys can use to get some good results. Now, Zacian, right? Everyone's favorite doggo, yeah? The king of VGC for Generation 8. This Pokemon was absolutely absurd. It used to have a base 170 attack stat, with Intrepid Sword being an incredibly good ability. Basically, every time this Pokemon switches in, it would get +1 to its attack stage. Now, in this generation, that has been heavily nerfed, so it only procs on the very first time that this Pokemon switches in. But regardless, I still think Zacian is an incredibly good Pokemon. Fairy Steel obviously is one of the best types in the game. And just have a look at these stats, man. It is still pretty damn absurd. For an offensive Pokemon, its defensive stats are very, very good. 148 speed does put it as, I believe, the second fastest, Pokemon in the metagame that is actually relevant. If we have a look here, it is actually, technically the fifth fastest Pokemon in the game still, which is obviously incredible. But Alecki and the Electrodes do currently see no play. But Calyrex-Shadow obviously being probably the king of VGC right now. Because of that, I do think Zacian still has quite a good place in the metagame, right? Fairy and Steel is still an amazing typing. And honestly, having Intrepid Sword is still really good. Obviously, Incineroar does, become a lot harder to play into, but there are definitely still ways around that. And I do think Swords Dance has become Zacian's best friend in this generation. Because of that, this is a mon where if you pair it up with the right support, Zacian can still sweep through games, right? This Pokemon is still incredibly fast. It still hits incredibly hard. And yeah, if you pair it with things like your own Incineroar and Rillaboom, you can really just, start getting up a lot of damage. And honestly, just sweep through from there. Fake Out plus this mon is pretty absurd. Not to mention, its signature move here, Behemoth Blade, is is very good into arguably the best Pokemon in the format, which is Fluttermane. Obviously, Fluttermane will kind of, fall off in terms of being the very best because the restricted are in the game. But I certainly would not be surprised if Fluttermane, remains the number one to, at least a top 3 Pokemon in the game. But yeah, Behemoth Blade is obviously fantastic. It also gets a very solid stab move here in Play Rough. I do really wish this move didn't miss. It is pretty awful that it is 90% accurate, but still, it is a very, very strong move. But this Pokemon also does have, a few other really cool, physical moves it can use as well, right? First one that comes to mind, obviously, is Sacred Sword. A very, very good move. Obviously, it's very good into things like these Iron Defense body press stuff that we see on the Zamazenta. Even the Komoro, which is kind of picking up as well. If Dondozo is a Pokemon that, continues to see play in the format, it is also very, very good. But really, if you have a look, this Pokemon does have a lot of really good physical options, right? I know it has access to things like Crunch as well. We see CC here. You get the Fang moves, P-Jab, there is quite a lot. Even Trailblaze is actually pretty good as well. As I do think Terra Grass is actually half decent on this mon. So even having something like Trailblaze plus Terra Grass is definitely a decent option. But of course, I think Protect is always just king on this Pokemon, right? Now, in terms of EVs, I will kind of touch on this here. Obviously, I do go through some of the EVs in the coming teams we're going to show off. But I do think the EVs for this mon are relatively simple, right? This is a Pokemon with very low HP. A very, very solid speed stat, but because Jolly Max does not outspeed Calyrex-Shadow, I do not think this Pokemon needs to run Jolly Max. And because its defenses are so good, you honestly don't have to invest much into him. And this HP stat really is the most subpar stat, in my opinion. And because of that, I do personally like maxing it out. Now, in terms of speed, I do think you would hit that 207 speed tier here. But the major thing really for me with 207 is just a little bit of inefficiency here. Essentially, 207 is for things like Iron Bundle, which I believe hits 206 off the top of my head. But if we have a look at this here, we've one off the speed bump. So personally, I like to just go up one here. It makes it nice and round here, which I personally love. And then it also kind of just allows you to max out your HP stat and then put the remaining 76 into your attack stat, which also leaves you with an even number, which is very good, obviously, when you're going for things like +1 from Intrepid Sword. And of course, Sword Dance giving you +2. Not to mention, 180 is still a very high attack stat, right? If you ever get an SD up with this after an Intrepid Sword, this Pokemon's doing a ridiculous amount of damage. But yeah, with a set like this, you still outspeed everything not named, Calyrex-Shadow. And of course, with Intrepid Sword, Swords Dance, you're still hitting really hard. And with max HP plus these defenses, especially with this typing as well being Fairy Dragon, this one can actually eat quite a lot of hits. Yeah, so anyway, we're going to jump over and have a look at some teams I pulled from the Limitless Tours. Guys, I've spoken about it before, and I'll speak about it again. If you guys aren't familiar with Limitless, I would definitely check out this website, especially, early in the format. You see tournaments here with, a lot of players in them, and a lot of really good players as well. You see the homie here, Sableye VGC, won himself a Regulation G tournament here with 47 players. We see Himmy Burns over here, hosting a tournament with 137. Tommy had a 100-player tournament as well. So it's very, very good. A lot of these teams I'm about to show off, I did pull from here. Just so you guys know, these are teams that do get results. So the first team we're going to take a look at here is Siegfried VGC's team that he used to win, I believe, a 76-player tournament. Now, this team here, again, EVs are completely mine, by the way, guys. I'm going to throw it out there again, just to make sure everyone knows. These teams are not public, at least that I have not seen them. So these are my EV spreads on their teams, just kind of trying to showcase it and just give you guys options to, test out on ladder. Of course, also, I'll drop all the pace for these down below in the description. But yeah, so this is the set here that, I was kind of talking about before. It's Behemoth Blade plus Play Rough, just dual stab with Swords Dance Protect. I've already run through the EVs, obviously, very, very solid. Yeah, I think this Pokemon's incredibly good. Terra Grass as well is very nice. Obviously, Grass gives you a, not a weakness. Grass is a ground resist, which can be very, very good into things like Groudon, of course, which is definitely a pretty good mod right now. Also gives you a resist into Kyogre. God damn, English is hard. But yeah, it gives you a resistance to Kyogre, who is definitely on the rise right now. But one thing you'll notice with a lot of these teams is they are paired with Pelipper, which at first I was like, Pelipper's like really interesting. I'm surprised it's getting some play. But again, Groudon being a steel type obviously does have a bit of issues, obviously going into some of these Sun teams, right? Whether they be Crydon teams or they're Groudon teams, of course. But not to mention, Pelipper also has Wide Guard, which is actually very, very good into the likes of our good friend Calyrex-Shadow, right? All right, having a Pokemon out there that can, one, resist the attacks coming out of the Mienshao, but also two, just click Wide Guard is very, very nice. Obviously, it also has Tailwind as well. But another major thing as well with Pelipper is, of course, it has access to Weather Ball and Hurricane, which are very powerful moves, especially in the rain. And while this Pokemon doesn't necessarily hit that hard, having such high power moves like Hurricane being base 110 and of course Weather Ball being base 100 in the rain, and both being stab as well, is very, very good. Now, this was a Rocky Helmet set, and because of that, I did make this very, very defensive, but I do think it is important to have a bit of special attack on the Pelipper. The next two teams we also will look at as well, you'll notice their Focus Sash, and because of that, they're max. But I do think Pelipper is a Pokemon that it really supports Zacian well, right? It gives you the rain, which obviously is really good into the fire types. It gives you Wide Guard support. It gives you Tailwind support as well. Like, if you need Tailwind to like come in late game and clean up some stuff, it is obviously very, very good. Rillaboom and Incineroar though, I've been through these, especially in the last video, which by the way, if you guys didn't check that out, didn't see that, go check it out. We touched on our good friends Caridon and Kyogre, two very disrespected Pokemon at the minute. Very similar to Zacian-Crowned, of course. But yeah, Rillaboom and Incineroar really just feel like the defensive backbones of every team. Having double Fake Out, Grassy Surge, plus Intimidate is very, very good. Not to mention, Rillaboom is fantastic into switching into some of those ground type attacks that we're talking about before. And of course, the fire types attacks, Incineroar is also very, very good at switching into. Honestly, just an amazing combo, right? And having things like Will-O-Wisp here and the knockoff as well on the Incineroar is very, very good. In terms of EVs, this is just here to help you live things like Precipice Blades. And the Rillaboom set is the Rillaboom set I've been running for the longest time now. I did speed creep it a little bit because I do think it's pretty important to outspeed some of the slower Groudons. I think Groudons will normally, I think they naturally hit like 110 and they'll put 4 into it always, so they hit like 111. Sometimes they round it to like 112. So because of that, I want just a little bit of speed to creep the creepers. Which I do think is very important because like Rillaboom is one of your better answers into a Pokemon like Groudon. It's very good at forcing the Terra, and if you are able to force the Terra, it makes things really easy for Pelipper plus the Urshifu Rapid in the back to clean up. Now, Urshifu Rapid's another one I'll quickly touch on here. Obviously, it's fantastic with Pelipper, right? Giving this Pokemon manual rain is always going to be really, really good. And Choice Scarf Urshifu is it's fantastic, right? It gives you an answer to those Incineroars, which will definitely plague the Zacians, right? So because of that, Urshifu Rapid plus rain obviously is fantastic, right? And these days I am just running max. You probably don't need to go like 252. You could probably even drop it down to like 156. But because we're so early in the format, I do just kind of want to go max attack in case people are kind of calculating for stuff. And I've also got to learn too, like what does and doesn't live Surging Strikes. But the other thing here to keep in mind as well is the speed stat. Max speed Adamant Urshifu is 1 point faster than Calyrex if it's holding a Choice Scarf. Very, very important to keep that in mind. And then finally on this team as well, it was what I'm assuming is a special attack boosting Fluttermane. Because of that, I've gone, modest 116 max speed. Essentially, the game plan here is because they're both the exact same stat, you will always get the special attack boost. And I do think Fluttermane is a Pokemon right now that needs speed. Speed kills. And if you are going for the special attack boosters, which is what I'm assuming they're going for here, I do think you still want to be as fast as possible. And so matching up the stats here is very, very good. And of course, just pumping into physical defense can allow you to live, an attack or two. So, Rosie Milo here, this is a team I believe they went 7-3 with in the Himi Burns Tour. Again, a very, very similar archetype, so I'm not going to go too in-depth with it. But you see here again, this team has the Zacian, the Pelipper, the Rillaboom, the Incineroar, and the Urshifu Rapid Strike. I believe a majority of these sets are actually the exact same, so at least in terms of moves, right? Again, we see Behemoth Blade, Player of Swords Dance, Protect here. We do see Terra Fairy, though, which is definitely interesting. Obviously, Fairy is a fantastic defensive typing, but I'm sure there's some calc that Terra Fairy Play Rough actually does pick up, which is what I'm very interested to actually see as the format develops, exactly why people are running the EVs they are. Then on this team here, we do have that Focus Sash Pelipper that I was telling you guys about before. On this one here, we have opted just to go max. I do think it is very important to be able to, outspeed things where you can and just get off these big attacks. Because honestly, Weather Ball and Hurricane do deal a lot of damage. Even though this mod doesn't hit that hard, they are very, very powerful, especially in the rain. This Rillaboom here, though, was Clear Amulet because our Assault Vest is on our Raging Bolt. Because of that, I did opt to go a little bit more offensive, going up to 196 bump here. And again, hitting that same speed tier because I do think it's important, and kind of the splitting and dumping into HP for the rest. But high horsepower, very, very important. I don't know if I actually touched on that before with the other Rillaboom. But the reason you need high horsepower on these teams is because Zacian cannot hit Miraidon. And Urshifu Rapid Strike also kind of struggles to deal with Miraidon, and because of that, you do kind of rely on the supporting cast of Incineroar, Rillaboom, and whatever the the special attacker of choice is, which on this team is Raging Bolt. These three are really your only real ways to deal with Miraidon teams, and so that's definitely something you got to keep in mind when you're picking this last move, right? Because I know a lot of people talking about even running things like Knockoff to help out with Calyrex-Shadow, and while Knockoff obviously does help out with Cali, I do think high horsepower and then just wood hammering the Callies is probably the better way to play it. We do see here, though, the Incineroar here opting for Flare Blitz over Will-O-Wisp. Definitely still really, really good. Obviously, I don't think Pelipper has to come every game on this team. That's definitely one of those things where you gotta, know as the player, do I bring Pelipper or not this game? Pelipper plus Urshifu, I'm sure, is an incredibly good lead into a lot of things. Having Wide Guard plus Surging Strikes is just super, super nice to have. I do like that this one here is Terra Water over Terra Fire as well. Terra Water Surging Strikes in the rain is pretty damn busted, but I think we all know that at this point. But then finally, Raging Bolt on this team. As we see, it is the Assault Vest variant with Terra Fairy. Again, this helps out a lot into things like Miraidon, which is obviously a bit of an issue for Zacian, as it really does kind of struggle to deal damage to it. But of course, T-Bolt, Snarl, Thunderclap, and Draco Meteor. It's a mon that hits really hard and is also really, really bulky. If I'm being honest, I'm surprised they didn't opt to drop Thunderbolt for something like Electro Web, as this team really is just kind of relying on Tailwind for the speed control. But nonetheless, obviously, still a very, very good set. T-Bolt does slap really, really hard, especially, coming off a special attack stat as high as this. And Urshi, we already kind of touched on Urshi. I would say that, maybe Ice Spinner could be cool on this, so you're not super duper reliant on Rillaboom for terrain. But in saying that, I do think Rillaboom plus Incineroar is pretty good into some of these, side spam teams that may pop up as the format, develops. So the final team we're going to look at here is Mendez Beats team. Now, you guys will notice it does have a pretty similar core. They all share the same core of 3, which is the Zacian, the Pelipper, and the Scarf Urshifu Rapid. Again, this Zacian here, running the exact same set as we've seen for all of them, Player Off, Behemoth Blade, Swords Dance. This one is Stellar Terror as well, which is obviously very, very good, getting on the extra damage on these 2 attacks, which is definitely very, very big. Pelipper running the exact same set every game. They're all Terra Ghost. For the most part, they're all Sash and Hurricane, Weatherball, Tailwind, Wide Guard. Just a very, very reliable set. Of course, Urshi on this team here, it is the Terra Steel, but the EVs are the exact same. It's Choice Scarf. Same moves, it does what it does best. This one here, I definitely expected to see Surging Strikes on, I'm not going to lie. But I guess there are some endgame situations where, Aqua Jet in the rain is very, very good. But this time, though, we do actually see a second Steel type on this team, which is very interesting, which is Archaludon. Now, Steel types right now are at a premium. They are very, very good, but the issue is there is not very many that are good. And because of that, I do think having Zacian and Archaludon on the same team is actually quite nice. Especially because Archaludon in the rain is... it's a very good Pokemon. I ran it at Perth. This Pokemon is very good when you know what you're doing with it. Obviously, Body Press is fantastic into a lot of these, threats in the metagame, especially if you can eat up an attack or 2. But of course, having Electro Shot, Flash Cannon, Draco Meteor, if you ever get some Electro Shots up in the rain, it does feel very, very good. But this team definitely does feel like it's more orientated around the Pelipper than some of the last teams did, which I actually don't really mind at all. I do think Pelipper plus Archaludon can definitely set up endgames for Zacian, especially too when you factor in the fact that, you can just lead Pelipper every game, pair it up with one of these 2 here being Archaludon or Urshi Rapid, and then, kind of clear a hole through, maybe position your Amoonguss to get a Spore or 2 off, and then next thing you know, your Zacian comes in after everything's been chipped, you've got a Spore off, and now I guess to just start one-shotting everything, which I do think is very, very good. In terms of EVs, I don't think I touched on them before, but essentially this one here, you just want to hit 36 Modest. The idea behind that really is just to get the special attack bump, because... really, you're getting your damage from your Electro Shots or your Body Presses, right? So you kind of just want to sit there, spam them out, and then, eventually, if you get to +2, all of a sudden you have 300 plus special attack, and now you're actually dealing some real damage with the Flash Cannons and the Dracos. The speed tier here is just so you outspeed Calyrex-Shadow Rider in Tailwind. I do think it's very, very important. 112 has become the new, minimum speed tier, which, by the way, I probably will actually work on a speed tier video this weekend. I was meant to do it last weekend, but I was in Perth and just didn't really get around to it. But max HP, of course, because that is, besides the special defense, this Pokemon's other, biggest weakness. So having max HP, pumping into Spadef, and adding the Assault Vest does make this Pokemon incredibly bulky. And then the final 2 mons here, of course, we see Giraffe and Amoonguss. Now, Giraffe with Throat Spray, I do really, really like right now. A big reason is, 1, Giraffe is the best anti-Calyrex-Shadow Rider Pokemon in the game. Simply because 1, it's a Trick Room setup, but 2, you're immune to the Ghost Stab and you are resistant to the Psychic Stab, which is very, very good. And you also don't care for things like Draining Kiss or, the Terra Fighting Terra Blast that they could potentially run. But yeah, Hyper Voice very good with Throat Spray. This one, you know, naturally hits pretty hard. So having a good spread move plus, you know, the Throat Spray to get the +1 special attack is very, very nice. And of course, Shadow Ball right now is incredibly good into Calyrex-Shadow Rider. It just gives you a way to deal with it, which is really, really good. You have Trick Room as well, because this team in particular can actually run in Trick Room. Pelipper, Archaludon, and Amoonguss are all very, very good. And if I'm being honest, Archaludon at +2 is like basically a restricted Pokemon anyway, so having, you know, options like that is very, very nice. But of course, just being able to reverse Trick Room when you are running something like Zacian is very good. And a Trick Room plus Tailwind it's always just a good option to have, right? You could be going up against an opposing Tailwind team. Maybe you've lost your Pelipper, and getting your Zacian under Trick Room might actually win you a game or two here and there. But yeah, a very, very solid mon. And finally, to wrap this team up here, we have Amoonguss, everyone's best friend, you know. Now, there are, you know, there's been a bit of, you know, discussion, right, about what the best way to run Amoonguss is right now. Like, really, do you want to run a lot of special attacks so it can eat things from, you know, the Kyogres, right? Which, I mean, obviously eats Kyogre pretty well. But do you want to make sure you can eat Calyrex-Shadow a bit better? You know, Miraidon's another mon running around. Or, you know, do you want to be in a position where you can eat attacks from, like, the Groudons and whatnot, right? There are a lot of, you know, really good physical attackers. But we are also right now in a metagame where there are actually quite a lot of special attackers, at least, you know, compared to the rest of Scarlet and Violet. And because of that, I just go for something in the middle right now. Obviously, this is something that is going to adapt as the format develops. This is just a very, very standard Amoonguss spread, right? You know, you're hitting a nice HP for Regenerator and Citrus Berry. And then you're kind of just splitting, making the defenses, you know, pretty even. We hit the bump on the defense. We pump the rest into Spadef. It's, you know, it's pretty good. Spore's very good. Rage Powder, Pollen Puff. Pollen Puff, honestly, is really, really good, especially with the Zacian set we were looking at earlier. Because you are so bulky, if you ever do get a side Pollen Puff into it, it is honestly pretty damn good. But yeah, anyway, guys, that's going to be it for the 3 teams I'm covering in today's video. I guess let me know what you think of them down below. Obviously, they are all very similar. Zacian, Pelipper, and Urshiraptor on all 3. And of course, 2 of them did actually have the Rillaboom and Incin. Which, again, they're all just really, really good Pokemon. But clearly, it is working, right? These players all had fantastic results, right? One of them won the tournament. The other 2 went 7-3 in, you know, the biggest tournament we've had so far. But yeah, guys, I guess let me know down below what you think. And yeah, let me know if there's any other Pokemon you want me to cover individually. I do plan on doing, you know, some lists with probably some, you know, top 10 teams over the weekend. The speed tier one as well is something I'm definitely going to be working on. Yeah. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for this one. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.